Welcome back to the Net Podcast NFL edition. So today we're going to talk about the NFL, the games that happened last week, and the games that will happen this coming week. So previous kind of hitting some of the games last week of big notice. I'll start with the Thursday night football game, San Francisco versus New York Giants, which San Francisco handily handled the Giants 30-12. Brock Purdy and Deebo Samuels went off for those games, which was insane. If you had them on fantasy, Deebo, I believe, had like 25 points. He had I believe 2 touchdowns and was leading receiver with 129 yards. And then going through the Sunday's games of notice is the Miami game. 70 points, 309 yards for Tua Tagovailoa. People are writing Tua off as, oh, he can't play in this game anymore. It's too physical for him. They got him help. They got him offensive line help to keep him protected. And he went, let's not forget, he had 309, 4 touchdowns, and was 23 of 26. That is very, very good for a quarterback. And this game had stuff written all over it. It's like Sean Payton was supposed to go to Miami with Tom Brady. Didn't happen. Miami was supposed to get Russell Wilson. Didn't happen. And we see the Broncos are struggling. Another notable game is Detroit winning against Atlanta. Both Detroit stays 3-0. Jared Goff looks like a new quarterback, which is pretty insane. Like, we all kind of wrote him off once he got traded. Like, oh, he was just in there to make the salary move. Let's see how long he's there for. And wow, we're seeing a different Jared Goff. We're seeing the old Jared Goff. Another game to mention is LA Chargers versus Minnesota Vikings. LA Chargers will get the win, but lose Mike Williams to a torn ACL, which is out for the season. So, if fantasy listeners, Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnson, look to pick them up. Yes, the last pickup with Josh Kelly. If you have him, he has not worked out. They need Austin Eckler back because they got to throw the ball because they don't have Austin Eckler. We see New York Jets play the New England Patriots 15-10. If you watch that game and you're a Jets fan, I feel sorry for you. I feel bad for Sauce. 15 straight wins over New York for New England. The Jets look terrible. Zach Wilson looked awful. Like we saw in the news that Joe Namath ripped Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson, 18 of 36, 157 yards. He was sacked 3 times for loss of 24 yards. Like the defense. I don't know what defense was on for the Patriots, but they were getting to Zach and forcing him to get rid of the ball. And then you see how talented that defense is on New York. And they did not sack Mac Jones once. Zeke Elliott broke for 80 yards on 16 carries. So you see that split between Zeke and Ramondre Stevenson, which I think Zeke will probably get more carries this week because they are playing Dallas. And I'll mention that in a little bit. But from the other games, a big notable thing is Jacksonville losing to C.J. Stroud 37-17. Stroud has not turned the ball over once, and he has 4 touchdowns, which is pretty nice. We see him taking that leadership, taking that stride with Houston, and then we see Baltimore lose after Justin Tucker missed the game-winning field goal in the end of regulation, and Indiana wins by a field goal in OT. We still see the struggles from Chicago, Justin Fields in that system, only scoring 10 points with KC running all over them, scoring 41. And Taylor Swift was in attendance to confirm her dating Travis Kelce, a UC Bearcat alum, which was great to see. We love UC boys. And then they repping UC, T. Kelsey, Desmond Ritter, and all them. Yes, Ritter didn't get the win this week, but they started 2-0, which is pretty good for Ritter in the second year. But back to the games. Arizona gets the win, upset against Dallas, 28-16. We did not see that coming. Dallas did not look good. Did not look good. And then the last game of the night, Vegas versus um, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh gets the win 23-18. Devontae Adams had a monster game, but Oakland just looks terrible. They're struggling over the last couple of years to get anything going. They thought Derek Carr and Devontae Adams reunion was going to be something. Didn't work out. They go and get Jimmy G. Jimmy G throws 3 interceptions this game. Comes out of the game with a concussion afterwards. But Pittsburgh, their defense was getting to them, They couldn't stop Devontae Adams, but they were stopping everything else. Josh Jacobs couldn't get anything going. Najee Harris on the other side couldn't get anything going either because of Max Crosby. And then T.J. Watt, like I said, and Alex Highsmith, and those boys were stopping Josh Jacobs even without Cameron Hayward, which was shocking. But other than that, there's some couple upsets, like I mentioned, Indiana, Houston, and honestly, Arizona against Dallas. And I forgot to mention, Cleveland gets the dub against the struggling Tennessee Titans. Ryan Tannehill is struggling. He is struggling this year. So I wouldn't be shocked if they go try in a different direction. And then the Monday night game, we had 2 games going on. Philadelphia versus Tampa. Philadelphia gets the win. Jalen Hurts. A.J. Brown back to him old self, 131 yards. Jalen Hurts threw for 207, and Swift ran for 130. They were running all over Tampa. And then the other game, Cincinnati, Los Angeles. Joe Burrow ended up playing this game. It was a close one, 19-16. Matthew Stafford, 269 yards, was the leading passer. And Jamar Chase had his best game of the season, 141 yards, I believe it was on 12 receptions, 0 touchdowns. Joe Burrow had 1 pick, didn't throw a touchdown, but he still looked a little rusty. Joe Mixon scored the only touchdown for the Bengals, while Stafford threw 1 touchdown to Tutu Atwell. But Matthew Stafford did have 2 interceptions. It was a really defensive game. Bengals got to the quarterback and Stafford 6 times for 48 yards loss, which was very good for our defense. We love to see it. I know they had some backups playing on the offense a line for them, but we saw Trey Hendricks get to the quarterback. We saw Sam Hubbard getting to the quarterback. We saw DJ and BJ Reader and Hill getting to the quarterback. Dax Hill got to the quarterback. We were putting pressure all over him. Logan Wilson had 2 interceptions that game. Love to see it from him. So it was very good. Very good game, very defensive game. So glad the Bengals got in that win column finally. And then kind of shifting to this week's games, starting off Green Bay and Detroit, another rivalry match within the conference. I think Green Bay pulls it out, but I think it'll be close. I like Detroit this year. I've been high on Detroit all season, which is taking us. Went 3-0 now. Jared Goff looks new. Can't wait till Jameson Williams comes back because I think that's going to prove going to help Amon St. Brown in the pass game with Jared Goff to help balance it out. And then the later games, you have Jacksonville, Atlanta. I think Atlanta gets a bounce back game. Same with Jacksonville. So I think we'll be close, but I like Jacksonville. The next games are Miami and Buffalo. In Buffalo, can Miami put another 70 points up against Buffalo, or is Buffalo's defense too good? I think the answer is no. I think Tua is a very good quarterback, but Buffalo is just a more complete team, especially if they don't have Jalen Waddle. Then they have to rely on Tyreek Hill, which Tyreek Hill will be guarded by Tre'Davious White, who's one of the best cornerbacks in this league. Next game, I think Chicago has a bounce back game against Denver. I just think Denver is struggling. I think Denver is in purgatory. They're gonna have to move on for Russell Wilson, I think, next year, and I think they will. I think they're gonna be in the market to draft a quarterback or to sign someone because Russell Wilson has been horrific since he's gotten to Denver. And I think that it's just time. I think Sean Payton needs to blow everything up and start fresh with his team. Because a lot of this was Nathaniel Hackett, and the old regime's team. Another good game we got in the division: Baltimore versus Cleveland. I think Baltimore pulls it out. They'll have a bounce back game again from what happened against Indiana. Tennessee, Cincinnati is always a good rivalry of the last few years. I think Cincinnati pulls out to go 2-2 above to get to 500. Tennessee, I think, continues to struggle the way Ryan Tannehill has been playing. He just looks horrendous. I believe he only has one touchdown, if I'm not mistaken. He is, and you're without some Peter Sharonsky, your offensive guard you drafted this year. Yeah, like I mentioned, yeah, one touchdown, three interceptions, 13 sacks. But I believe that's the most sacks in the NFL right now for a quarterback. He's been sacked a ton. Other than I would probably say Justin Fields. I believe Justin Fields might have a little bit more. No, yeah, they're tied. They're tied with both 13 sacks, lead the NFL, which is pretty bad for Brian Tannehill. We saw he was playing very good last season and a couple of years before that, last couple seasons. They even bring him D Hawkins, and they're struggling to get him the ball, struggling to get anything going with Tennessee. So I wouldn't be shocked if they do a quarterback change in the next couple of weeks if this keeps happening. Another game to point out that I like is Pittsburgh Houston. Young quarterbacks going against each other. Two different types of teams. You have the likes of a young building Houston team, and then you have a very dominant defense in Pittsburgh, which should be an interesting thing. You have Minnesota versus Carolina. Right now, it looks like Bryce Young could be slated to play. He did not play last week against Seattle. He is in line, on track to start, but I like this Minnesota team. Yes, they've kind of been unlucky in their losses. That other than the Eagles game, which is somewhat close, they've been within 3 points. They just have been unlucky, and we see they just signed or traded for Cam Akers. I don't know how much he'll be involved in this game. He might be, he might not. Kirk Cousins, he's playing great. 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Great 1-2 punch, I think, to replace Adam Thielen. And then you have TJ Hawkinson, who's pretty good this season as well. One of the impactful players I would like to point out is Ivan Pace, undrafted free agent, middle linebacker out of Cincinnati. Came in, he probably was going to be death out, and now he's the start. He's been the starting middle linebacker for them since the beginning of the season. He has 13 solo tackles, 7 assisted, 20 total tackles, a half a sack. He's looked very good. He's running that offense just like he did. Defense just like he did in Cincinnati for the Bearcats last year. So I'm very happy for the guy. Hopefully, he can put on another performance against Carolina. And then the later games, you have the New England versus Dallas. I think that's going to be a big game. Zeke returning home to AT&T Stadium, where he spent most of his career. I think they're gonna let Zeke loose against Dallas and show what they're missing with that 1-2 punch they had with Tony Pollard. I think that was the best 1-2 punch running team in the NFL last year. You had Tony Pollard who could do it rushing and receiving, and then you have Zeke, a power back, a physical power back who. Yes, he's been injured the last few years, but he's still, when healthy, is so good. So I think that's going to be a good game. I think Dallas bounces back, though. Let's see how they do without Travion Diggs. Yes, they were without Diggs last week, but it really showed. Let's see if they can kind of cope with the mistakes that happened on the defensive side and hopefully let Micah Parsons loose against Mac Jones, which we've seen Micah do throughout his career, his young career so far, getting to the quarterback. And then the later game, you have Kansas City, New York. Kansas City, this is a dub. Sorry, New York, you're just going to struggle again. Zach Wilson, not the quarterback. They really want Aaron Rodgers back. You can tell. But you just have to work with it. And then the Monday night game, Seattle versus New York. I think New York has a bounce back game after what happened on Thursday night against San Francisco. But I think they get the dub against Seattle. I think it's going to be within 3 to 7 points. I think it's going to be close. I just think Giants they have to have a bounce back game. Yes, no Saquon Barkley again, but Daniel Jones, after that poor performance he had against San Francisco, he's going to have a bounce back game. But I wouldn't be surprised if Seattle wins. but I think New York. The team that I like out of, because I usually do my fantasy things, I like the matchup between a lot is Los Angeles and Indianapolis. I like Puka, and I like Stafford's odds against Indianapolis. I don't think Indianapolis is going to do that well. Yes, they've kind of got some lucky wins, but I don't see it sticking with them. And then another matchup I do like is would probably have to be Philadelphia, Washington. We saw what happened against Buffalo, only scoring 3 points against Buffalo. I think Jalen Hurts is going to have a great game. I think AJ Brown's going to pick up where he left off, and I also think that Jalen Hurts can get stuff going, which we kind of saw him do last week on Monday night. But I think this is a perfect game for him. Probably a team to avoid playing players is probably Houston. If you have the likes of Tank Dell and Nico Collins and CJ Stroud, and Damian Pierce, I think you avoid playing those guys because of how physical and how good Pittsburgh's defense is. You have TJ Watt, you have Alex Highsmith, you have Cole Holcomb, you have Kawan Alexander, and then on the backside, Levi Wallace and um, Mika Fitzpatrick. And sorry, it was Cole Holcomb is the middle linebacker who I was trying to say. Of talent all around, their defense is still one of the best defenses in the league. Not as what it used to be, but if you ever have TJ Watt on your team with Alex Highsmith, and even when healthy Cam Hayward, that's a physical defense that I would avoid trying to play against. Because Mika, you saw Mika, he's always been a beast. And then another team to avoid is Tampa and New Orleans. You never know how that game's going to go. Derek Carr, is he going to play? Is he not going to play? The running game hasn't been there for the Saints. They need Alvin Kamara back. Tampa, hit or miss with Baker Mayfield at the center. So that's an interesting one that I would watch out for with my players if I'm playing fantasy. And then kind of segueing that to some of the big injuries we've seen over the last few weeks. The likes of Nick Chubb going down with the MCL tear, and they pick up Kareem Hunt to hope Philly replace, but they are going to lean on Jerome Ford. So if you don't have Jerome Ford, I'd say you should pick him up. We're seeing a lot of people. Kyler Murray's still out. They're projecting him; he won't be ready until at least after week 5. Buda Baker still we have not seen from, so we don't know if he's coming back. And then led the likes of there are certain guys like Marlon Humphreys we haven't seen yet. Odell Beckham still a little bit banged up but hasn't practiced. Austin Eckler, who I mentioned earlier, is still out. Aaron Jones is questionable, but they said Aaron Jones and Christian Watson are supposed to make their debut on Thursday night, but it'll be a game time decision. So there are some. We're seeing a lot of injuries and we're seeing a lot of people going down, and we see a lot of these NFL teams are playing on turf, and a lot of injuries happen on turf, which can 100% the turfs and not playing on grass, but there are those tackles that are unavoidable that happen in this game. So, kind of talking about those injuries, we have a lot of who's on the hot seat, who could be traded. Jonathan Taylor could be traded here soon. He's still on the injury reserve, so he's not able to play for the first 4 weeks. My thing is, this Denver Broncos team, is it panic time yet? With the struggles, I just don't think we're seeing a lot of issues from this team. It's like you bring in Sean Payton thinking you can be the next best thing. You are like, okay, can we get something out of Russell Wilson? Is he our guy? Probably not. He hasn't looked good since he's came from Seattle, where I think talking off camera to people that Seattle, he had a perfect situation in Seattle. He had the weapons, he had everything, he had the coach. He comes here and it just to he just comes to Denver and he just looks terrible. Um, Hopefully he can bounce back, but I just think it's time to move on. It's time to see if there's a different option at quarterback. If that's drafting a young quarterback like a um, Caleb Williams or a Cameron Ward or a Michael Penix Jr., or if that is trying to sign a free agent or trade for a free agent or trade for a player of talent. But from kind of like where we're at, some people might say it's too early to hit the panic button, but based off of last season, yes, I know it's a different coach, but we're seeing similar things, struggles from last, because it is the same team, just minus a few players. Like Bradley Chubb was traded, but unfortunately, it could be an issue. Could we? And then with the Saints, like you talk about Sean Payton's other team, like they're barely getting wins. It's Derek Carr that answer down there. If Derek Carr can't play, Jameis Winston will step in. Let's see how that goes. But we've seen a lot of teams struggling that I'm shocked. We've It's been coaching, it's been the system. We've seen a lot of injuries, like I mentioned, J.K. Dobbins going down injured, Nick Chubb going down injured, Mike Williams, all ACL or Achilles or severe injuries that have hindered their team. But something that I've noticed, even without Deontay Johnson, the Steelers' offense looks like they're kind of picking it up. They're starting to get things moving. I knew it would take time, but I thought I thought it would be quicker, but we'll see how that goes throughout the season. This is, to be honest, there's just like this college football season. I don't think there's like a clear favorite. Maybe the Chiefs, just because they've always won it. But outside of that, we've seen the holes from KC if they don't have certain players. We've seen maybe San Francisco might be that complete team. Other than San Francisco is probably that complete team. I think they might be the favorites. Let me take that back. There is one favorite, and I think it's San Francisco. But other than that, maybe Philadelphia. But there are holes in that secondary and hole, like the safeties, and then holes in that in the with the linebackers. They're young and experienced. Can they hold up for 18 games, 17 games or more due to their playoff run? So there's so much up in the air, and I think whoever gets Jonathan Taylor, if it is a contending team, it can help their team, whoever he goes to. If it's Miami, if it's Philadelphia, if it's and then Devontae Adams, I saw he could be asking for a trade. There are multiple teams that need a receiver, which I could see a lot of teams going for. Maybe go back to Green Bay, maybe to Jets, maybe to the Cowboys. They could use a receiver. And we've seen a lot of big name players be traded for nothing. And could Devontae Adams go for nothing, just like we've seen before with other big name players, or do they get a haul for him like Green Bay did? But I would say this season could be anywhere. And I kind of went through some of the games fast, just because of I didn't know how much time we had, and keep it short. But another game that I wanted to hit on before we go is hit more of the Miami Buffalo game. I think that's going to be I think those are the two teams that are contending for that division, and I think whoever wins this game will show that they're going to win the division. I like Buffalo's chances, but Miami is a good team. Like, yes, I know I said Buffalo will probably win, but don't count Miami out. Yes, Jalen Waddle didn't play. Hopefully he's back, because that gives them another weapon. It's a bunch, honestly, and people have compared this. It's just a bunch of track stars, and it makes sense because they're all super fast. They're all super quick. Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Raheem Mostert, their running back they just drafted, who had exploded last week, in Devin Achina. He he exploded at Texas A&M this year. He looked pretty good. Their defense is pretty good with Christian Wilkins, Jerome Baker, and those boys. And I thought they would struggle on the defensive side, especially without they got rid of Byron Johnson, who they signed for big money in the offseason a couple years back to play cornerback. I thought they would struggle with losing him, but they still have Xavier Howard. They picked up Deshaun Elliott. They still have Javon Holland. So they and then picking up, I think, Bradley Chubb, obviously the pair with Jen Phillips was a great pickup. And they just have dogs on both sides. Their offensive line is one of the best. You have Teron Armstead, Isaiah Wynn, Connor Williams, Robert Hunt, and Austin Jackson, who are pretty good and pretty solid guys at your offensive line back, because they worked on getting bigger bodies up front to help and develop them better to protect Tua. And then you have Tua. He's looked pretty good. I don't believe he's thrown a pick yet. Oh, sorry, he's thrown 2 picks for 8 touchdowns. And I believe he hasn't been sacked much. I believe, if I'm not, yeah, he's only been sacked once, which is quite insane. Like, there's some good offensive lines in this league, and I think Miami has the ability to be one. And then Mike McDaniels is a great coach. I think he's a great fit for this. I think he's a better fit than Sean Payton when they were trying to get Sean Payton. But I think Tua played very well. Has been playing very well over the last couple games. Against the Chargers, he had an unbelievable game, and then against Denver, he had an unbelievable game. New England was that outlier because New England's defense is just always good, even when their offense isn't. But don't sleep on Miami. I think Miami, everybody written off Tua because he's injury prone. He gets injured a lot. He needs protection, but I think they have their protection right now. And I think the big test will be against Buffalo with those big boys in Ed Oliver, Mike Milano, Micah Hyde, and Jordan Poyer, and those boys getting to the quarterback. And so that's where I'm at. Like, that's, I think, the most probably interesting game of this week. So hopefully that will be an entertaining game. And then my Bengals, hopefully we pull off another win to get us up to 200 to 500 against Tennessee, a struggling Tennessee team who I can't see. They're like in a weird, I think their window for the Titans just kind of is closing or closed because they had a window, and I just think they couldn't get it. But we'll see. Season is on. We're only 3 weeks in. Of an 18-week season, 18-week league. So we'll see how, and we can regroup. We'll regroup kind of like at the midpoint too, and each week we'll digest more and more of the teams. But yeah, those are who I think will win, what games are interesting, some of my fantasy advice. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode, and we'll be back with some soccer and some NBA and more college football in the near future. But I'll see you back on the next episode of the Net to Net podcast, hopefully with the boys, Casey and Caleb, when we join back for some soccer, and I believe some of the football that they'll join on. And then for basketball, once basketball season started, because I'm knowing Casey wants to talk a big thing about basketball. So hopefully we'll see you guys soon. But if not, like and subscribe us on YouTube and Spotify, and see you guys soon. Peace. It's 28 minutes, so I definitely talked fast.